Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us today Mr. Nathan Peter Olgoff. And the cheering is coming. There it is. Okay, I stopped it a long time ago, but it was still going. It's always an adventure with those things. Like, I never know if the button is going to work, and then I have to edit it in on the back end, and I'm not good at video editing, so it's just an adventure every time, kind of like books. So, Nathan, before we get into your writing, tell me a little bit about yourself. Who is Nathan? Where are you from? What do you like to do when you're not writing? All that kind of good stuff.
Hi everyone. So I am a brand new author. I currently live in New Westminster, British Columbia, although I'm on the island right now. I'm taking care of my mom for a bit. Um, and I'm 39 years old, and when I'm not writing, there's a bunch of stuff I like to do. I like to play video games. I also have an electronic drum set that I sometimes play, and I spend a lot of time making Lego spaceships in Lego Studio, which some of them I have high photorealistic renders on my Instagram. So, yeah, that is me in a nutshell.
Okay, nice. I also saw, because I did manage to briefly stalk your Instagram. You're into metal as well, so I feel like
Oh,
Legos and metal are things that every child should grow up wanting to be when they are a man. Like, I wish I had as many Legos as I used to when I was younger. Like, I would be making all the spaceships and all the pyramids and all the crazy stuff. But unfortunately, I just don't have room for it. I mean, I have to have space for my VR. I have to choose one or the other.
yeah.
So, like I said, I stalked your Instagram a little bit. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, I make them in Lego Studio because they don't have the space or the part count enough for what I want to make, and I don't want to buy it all right now because I am prioritizing the novel. But until then, I got what I have on my computer.
Okay, awesome. I see. So that's actually something that's interesting. As I was stalking you on your Instagram, I found that you have a lot of very candid posts about what your journey to authorhood has been like,
Mhm.
and I really appreciate that. Like, you showed a picture of your apartment, and you did like a timeline of starting in 2012 all the way up to the present. So walk me through a little bit what your journey has been like and some of those hardships.
Uh, so I think the first hardship was just the fact that I chose to do this as an alternative to what I'd been doing before. So I thought I was going to work in the video game industry for the rest of my life. And then in 2012, that ended because I had lost my passion and I had a bit of a bad experience with it. And so I then got this idea for a novel, but I would say my hardship was just reconciling my dream with sort of what society expects out of you. So, I mean, I was working in construction while working on my novel, but part of working in construction, like if I could sum up my life sort of in like 2013, 2014, my life was just basically me going, what, what, what's going on? What? Just everything had been turned upside down. And then, in the early stages, I had some bad advice from somebody who basically didn't know what the hell they were talking about with regards to fostering the growth of authors, and so it's advice that could have easily have just killed my dreams right in there, and could have easily wrecked a lot of other people. So that's a hardship, and then I would say just the extended amount of time I've spent doing this. So I started in 2013, thought it would be done 2 years later. Well, 9 years later, after being split off into two, then four, then 8 books, um, 9 years later, I finally finished the first one, and then that whole time, some of the challenges were just sort of, I guess you could say, like sad information that you're given. Like, so first challenge was you're gonna have to have a platform that publishers expect, right? And that can be a podcast, it can be a website, it can be social media. I have, except the podcast, I have all of that, and so I'm like, okay, and then one of the next hurdles is they tell you like, well, the average novel sells less than 1,000 copies. Even if you are traditionally published, you're going to have to do a lot of the marketing yourself. And then I think the biggest kind
Mhm.
of blow came to me this year when I heard that. after trying to find a literary agent for a year, I heard that agents and publishers won't take you on unless you have enough decent enough book sales, which kind of doesn't make sense because if I'm writing a book and I want to get it out there, isn't that your job to do? So it just sounded to me like it was the industry was pretty much pushing me into the self-publishing route, which I committed to in June, July this year, and I think a lot of the other hardships are imposter syndrome, and then sometimes people discourage you because this is one of those paths where if you decide to go down it, a lot of people are very sketchy and skeptical, and they're like, "Why do it? It's so much risk. You know, you might be financially ruined. Why are you gonna do that?" And just it's balancing out what you want and sort of what makes you happy with, um, again, what a lot of society and people just their expectations they kind of knowingly or unknowingly force upon you. And so, yeah, I would say those are
Yeah.
definitely the hardships I've had.
Yeah, well, you've touched on a couple of very interesting points in what you were just saying. The first one would be you said that you were trying to reconcile what society wanted out of you versus this creativity that you had inside of you. And the two don't always line up. And I feel like that's often a struggle that authors encounter. And the second one would be this kind of the business aspect, so to speak, of writing. And so you have this juxtaposition of creativity as well as you have to be a business person and an entrepreneur in order to set out on this venture of possible financial ruin, like you were saying. And so figuring that out as an author is very difficult. But I think we can all agree it's just one step at a time, one foot forward, and we'll see what happens. Moving on again to your Instagram, which I thoroughly stalked. I came across a video of you unwrapping your book for the first time. Walk me through some of those feelings because I have yet to do that, and I've had it in my head what it will be like, but I'm really curious what was going through your head.
Well, first of all, it came a month after I had ordered an author review copy from Ingram Sparks, and I finally got it, and I was like, it's here, great, and it was bound in cardboard just to protect it, and then I set up the video, and I opened it up, and I knew I was going to need scissors, and so I kind of make a funny little joke about that. I open it up, I look at it in my hands, and you tell people, like, okay, it's one thing to have an idea. I mean, people like to talk. They like to say, "Oh, I'm going to do this. I got an idea for this. I want to do that." They rarely get around to it again because of other things in life getting in the way. Well, it's one thing to have that. It's another thing to have an idea, flesh it out, really work on it, and then it manifests itself into physical reality that's in your hands. That's what it felt like. I mean, it's a lot different to hold it in your hands than to just say read an ebook version. There's something that makes it again very real and tactile. Your idea is no longer just a concept. It's now it's something. It's out there. It's something you've birthed into the world, and that's something you can say you have done, and a lot of people haven't. So it was a good feeling. I was excited. I think I called my mom the same day and said, "Guess what I got?" I was showing so many people, even showed some people at the gym. Uh, yeah, I think one of the best days of my life for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, like I said, I've often fantasized about it for myself. And when I first started off on my writing adventure, we'll call it, I always told myself, I was like, I'm going to write this book. And even if it sucks and no one else wants to read it, I'm still going to make a copy for myself. And I'm going to put it on the wall and sign it and make myself feel good and, pass it on to my daughter someday. So I am awaiting the day that I can unbox my book. And I will also probably post a video of it and maybe cry a little bit. We'll see. So, the Sapien Empire. You've tagged it as a post-apocalyptic epic where civilization returns. So, my first question would be, what is the scale of this? Is this a localized apocalypse on a world kind of like Mad Max, or is this like a galaxy-wide apocalypse, kind of like the Foundation trilogy? Like, walk me through that.
It takes place on Earth, so it's not galaxy wide by any means. And the scope of it will be massive. I will, as I said, it rebuild civilization across the planet, and I will be having story arcs that take place all over the planet. As for, uh, so you asked me what did you ask me what caused the collapse, or did you just ask me like what caused what caused the collapse?
That was actually my next question. So yeah, well, what caused the collapse?
So where my novel differs from other apocalyptic novels is that most apocalyptic novels have what you call a singular event. It's everything's okay, then suddenly something happens and civilization goes to shit. Um, like in The Walking Dead or The Last of Us, everything's fine. Suddenly there's a zombie outbreak. Nuclear war, everything's like Fallout. Everything's fine. Suddenly countries are firing nukes at each other. Radioactive wasteland. Like it's like that. I don't have a singular event. I have sort of a civilization going out not with a bang but a whimper. And so the backstory is over the course of the 21st century, you see as the world population gets higher and resource demand becomes greater and climate change doesn't really get addressed the way it should. You see sort of countries essentially becoming a lot more local. So, NATO dissolves, the EU dissolves. There's more talk about our own versus the other. Eventually, it becomes countries degenerate into states, and then eventually city states. To the point that by the early 22nd century, the world is really the world. The world is really a patchwork of city states, where for each city state the standard of living is fairly decent, but they're in seas of chaos. And that's that. However, that didn't get it to the level of decay I wanted. And there's this event that I wanted to put in called the All Silence, which, as it's described, it was an event that came from the sky. Electrical grids were fried across the planet, and the planet everywhere had interesting auroras of green, blue, and red all over the planet. And that one event was just like that, just undid everything. So, yeah, that is a
Hmm.
story of what happened. That's how civilization collapses in my series.
Sorry, I think we're getting a little bit of lag.
Oh,
Um,
did you catch all that?
yeah, I think I got most of it.
Okay.
Again, a little bit of lag here and there, making the conversation hard, but no problem. Okay, so is it? Would you say that this story is more about the fall of civilization or civilization reemerging from the ashes?
A bit of both. So I place a heavy emphasis on the human element of civilization, and um, sort of how it collapses not because of something outside of us, but because of our own decisions and our own disagreements and our own ways of not saying eye to eye. And so that when it comes back, they really have to take that into account and really take a deep dive into like why people think the way they do and why they view the world they do, why they have the personalities they have. And in remaking the world, how to take that into account to prevent it from happening again. So, yeah, I mean, the fall is there as a backstory. It's not heavily emphasized, but I mean, it does serve a purpose that I think is very relevant to the themes and the message of the novel series.
Hmm. And is this modeled after our current political climate, or is it a world of the future?
I would say our current political climate and world has a lot of influence on me as I write this series. I do think about a lot of the problems of the world and kind of just suggestions I might be able to give in helping make it better. Um, what else? What else? What else? Yeah, it definitely does play a part. But I mean, I guess you could say, in general, I think about just all parts of human history and sort of how they thought and what they thought was right and wasn't necessarily right. And I take that into account as the characters eventually take into account as they constantly just try to improve upon the civilization they're desperately trying to make.
Okay. And so you've mentioned briefly you have countries as well as characters that you're kind of like following throughout this. So would you say that um, this is more about the world that is going through this event, or is it about the characters in the world that are going through this event?
Uh, I would say just because science fiction tends to focus more on situations and ideas rather than just specifically people, I would say, um, yeah, the world does play a good part in it. I mean, obviously the characters are there and they are affected by it, and they do make the decisions they do for valid reasons. But I do have a heavy emphasis on what they encounter and sort of these people groups and factions they encounter, and how it really just sort of when it gets thrown at them, it really makes them have to just go back and reassess and go, okay, do we have it right? Or do we have the proper game plan here? Or do we have to change? So, but I mean, there are peer types, or not sorry, there are points in the novel one and the second one that I'm working on right now, where it's just two characters, for example, just sitting and talking, and that's how they're driving the story forward. So, not quite sure if that answers your question, but that's the best answer I have.
Yeah, that's good enough. We want to leave a little bit shrouded in darkness so that your readers want to pick up the book and experience it.
Mm-hmm.
So, what would you say the basic plot line is without too many spoilers?
Uh, the basic plot line is civilizations coming back, and it starts in the Pacific Northwest where I live, and it just spreads out southward and eastward into the interior from there. And that's how civilization comes back slowly. I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day. They slowly rebuild, and as parts get better and loyalty in those parts um, towards the people that help them gets better, then they have more people to help rebuild even more parts of the world.
Okay. Yeah, so I saw that you have 8 books planned.
Mhm.
That's a lot. I don't even have that many books planned, let alone for a single series. So, what's the timeline looking like in the first book versus the 8 books, and I'm assuming the entire Return of Civilization as a whole?
So how it looks is book one comes out in February next year. Book two comes out in November next year. Book three comes out November next the year after that, 2025. Book four comes out 2026. Depending on how well the books are going, and if I can keep continuing this, I take the following year off and just sort of figure things out and start planning books five through eight. And so Uh, that would be 2027 that I take off. So book five would be 2028, six, 29, seven, 30, and then eight would be 2031. Uh, which sounds really crazy to say, but yeah, given my game plan, that's what my life looks like.
Yeah. Well, I'm appreciative that you outlined your entire publication strategy for me, but I was more curious about the timeline in the world. I guess I should have clarified that. Is
Oh,
this
okay.
a
So
20-year story? Is this a 200-year story?
Oh,
What is it?
it's definitely going to be a 200-year story. I mean, if you're rebuilding civilization back to a much better standard, it's not going to happen
Yeah.
uh, in 10 years. That's just no way. It does have to be on a
Hmm.
scale of centuries. And even then, some people might say it's a little too short. But I can make it work. I can make it convincing enough to work. And I think it coming back is relevant and it is necessary to the people in the story, especially at the speed that I want it to come back.
Hmm. Gotcha. As I was going over one of I forget which site it was, but it was talking about some of the themes in your book, and they were very somewhat called dark. They're very adult themes. So, walk me through if these themes are only relevant in your post-apocalyptic world, or if you are trying to perhaps tell a message about the state of our current society in regards to these difficult themes.
Yeah, well, yeah, I definitely have issues about the state of our current society. Uh, the issues are relevant in the story. Sorry, what was the first part again? I don't know why I'm forgetting this stuff.
Yeah, sorry. I think we're getting a little bit of lag. It's making it hard. So, gosh, how did I? I just come up with these questions on the spot, so I'll have to think about it. How did I say that? It was the themes in regards to, are they only problems that you think the people in the post-apocalyptic society are experiencing, or are you trying to correlate these difficult themes as themes that are currently being experienced by our world, but you're just telling it in a post-apocalyptic story?
Uh,
If that made it any more or less clear.
yeah, yeah. So it's definitely the second one because um, I feel like society and civilization is very shaky right now. Like the system's being tested. Mother Nature is waking us up to the fact that we can't really keep going and doing what we're currently doing. And so it is. There are problems in the story, but I try to take problems in real life and weave them into the story, and not because yeah, I do want to sort of save us from the brink of collapse, but also I think some of the problems in our society sometimes they're just universal. Sometimes they've been around. Sometimes they're problems that any society is going to have, no matter what, um, how they come about and what's going on. And so I do also weave that into my story I as I tell the story, as I develop the civilization, and as I develop the characters.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. Did you want to read an excerpt tonight?
Sure, I can read an excerpt. I gotta say this first, though. It's interesting with this lag because it reminds me of when I was watching news, and they always talk to like a news correspondent in another country via satellite. So, what's the situation? 4 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned. Okay, so some context for the scene is basically the main character is called the Machine, right? And he makes machines for this villain or antagonist called the Arch Lord Chief, and he's basically come up with an idea for a machine. He's told the Arch Lord Chief, and the Arch Lord Chief has rewarded him with a woman from his harem. And so in this scene, he takes the woman back to his workshop called the Shop Garage, and I will just let it play out right now. The machine right had led Jerem into a large, wide, two-storied room. The first thing to hit her was the warmth, followed by an oily, greasy smell that reminded her of the vehicle exhaust. Jerem stopped in her tracks, giving herself a moment to take it all in. Shindo had taken her to the shop garage she had heard about. There was a stark contrast to the fine wood-paneled walls and smells of wine and Nabis plant she had just come from. Off to her left was a table with various tools hung up over it. Parts of machines or vehicles, she wasn't sure which, lay scattered upon the floor. Everyone had different levels of comfort, but why here? Didn't he have his own room? Unless it couldn't be. Was this where he lived? As the machine right led her around a corner, she saw a simple wooden table with a stained wooden chair next to a small bed conspicuously tucked within an alcove. There didn't appear to be enough room for two people, but she was going to have to make the best of it. Shindo hovered near the bed. He looked her in the eyes for the first time in the evening. The young man was probably confused or nervous. It must have been a long time since he had been with someone. Jerem drifted past him, sat on the bed, and lightly patted it. Come, sit, said Jerem. The machine right did that and nothing else. He kept craning his head away from her, staring outside of his sleeping alcove towards the wide table across the shop. Jerem looked in the same direction that the tools hung right above. They wouldn't be his focus for long. Why don't I give you a massage? She said. That's when she. That's what she needed to do. Take the edge off. Jerem reached behind his neck to take off the leather apron and one piece. She gave a feather-light touch, but it made the young man flinch and shift away. Did he forget the touch of a woman because it had been that long? She stopped. It might have been more than that. Jerem didn't know how long Shindo had been kept here, within the confines of the city. Was he born here? Was the Arch-Lord Chief one of the only people he ever talked to? Jerem couldn't have been the first woman in that bed. But maybe. Shindo, said Jerem, have you ever been with a woman before? He made the faintest attempt to say something but didn't speak. Okay, look, she said. Just relax. Everyone makes a big deal about it and blows it completely out of proportion. It's really nothing more than an experience. A pleasurable one that. No, said Jerem, or said Shindo. You fail to understand. I've never wanted to. Jerem's shoulders slackened and she perked her eyebrows. Oh, it was only a couple of years before the Arch Lord Chief took me, but I remember the boys and girls of my compound, at least the ones around my age, like it happened overnight. They all of a suddenly paid more attention to each other and showed more affection. I thought something was wrong and told my mom. She smiled and said, "People do that. They need to form feelings for each other so they can make more people." But for me, those feelings never happened. Jerem placed her hand on her thighs to consider what to do next. Hey, listen, she said. I won't make you do anything you don't want to. She hadn't been looking forward to having sex with him on that swell cot, nor being his first. Jerem didn't know who was more relieved, herself or him. Shindo said nothing. He shifted and tilted his head as if he was thinking about something intently, like there was a meeting of several voices happening in his head. Acting as if she wasn't there, he got up, walked over to the table across the shop, and sat. Jerem stayed sitting on the bed as she heard Shindo scribbling frantically across from her. It must have been really important to him. This was a first for her, a man who'd rather work than be with a woman. He didn't seem like the kind of guy to get angry if curiosity got the better of her, but it wouldn't hurt to ask. Do you mind if I look around? She said. No. Shindo didn't even look away from his table. Jerem got up and looked to her right, down the shop towards the large bay doors at the end. There was a large furnace-like structure in the middle of the room, between them and the doors. She guessed it was for heating something, but didn't know what. Jerem was sent here to make him happy, and if her body didn't please him, then maybe it would it would help to take an interest in what he was doing. She walked up to the table. Mind if I take a look at what you're drawing? He jumped in his seat and looked up at her. Jerem didn't think she had snuck up on him. Shindo had either been that deep in his work, or was just a jittery person in general. You can, he said. It wasn't a small piece of paper, not just sketches. She could tell from the fine detail that he'd been working on this for a while. I need to catch up, said Shindo. This has been put off for far too long. You can leave if you want to. Oh, I think it's in both our best interests that I stay here for the night. If I returned, Vibran might get mad at me for abandoning you, or get mad at you for refusing his gift. You understand? Shindo ignored her and scrawled on. Right, she said in mild frustration. Jerem accepted she wouldn't be garnering much of his attention tonight. She casually panned the room, noticing details that had escaped her when she had first entered. Old schematics hung by nails on the wall. Unique machine parts lay on tables. Around the room were bins of various metal and vats filled with different colored fluids. She hadn't the faintest clue what most of it was used for, but she had suspected something from the moment he had entered the harem. Did you make all these? Said Jerem. Yes, said Machine Right. Jerem walked up to one of his stranger components and examined it more closely. We heard rumors that the Arch-Lord Chief wasn't making all these newer vehicles, machines, and devices by himself. That he had the help of someone who was kept in the shadows. How long have you been here? Almost 10 years. How often do you let you leave? As often as I need, but only as I need. Are you happy doing what you do? The machine right reacted to Jerem's question as if he were struck by a wooden pole. He stopped scrawling momentarily. If happy is doing what the abstract has made you to do, then yes, I am happy. Shindo returned to drawing. I'm pretty sure it would have been nice to have your own room, though. Somewhere to forget about this workshop. Somewhere a bit more. I spent a little time thinking about that word, happy. I find it. He sharply hit the pencil on the table. I find it only makes my life harder than it has to be. Jerem couldn't tell if he was upset or simply flustered. She nonetheless wanted to offer some form of comfort. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to. Please. There was a bite to his words. You have questions. I have the answers. I can give them to you in the morning, but not right now. The machine right picked up his pencil and continued to scrawl. Jerem knew as much as she was going to know about him tonight. She sat on the small chair beside the bed, despite being ignored, it was nice to be in the presence of a man who didn't want her body. After an hour, Shindo finished his diagram and headed to bed. He moved right past her and fell into the bed as if she weren't in the room. Understandable at this point. Shindo hadn't even changed out of his one piece. He sure looked tired, for he fell asleep. As he slept, he kept tossing and turning. Shindo shuffled to one side, making a space large enough for her to slip into. Jerem lay on the bed and put her arm gently around his shoulder. Stillness seeped in. Jerem couldn't help but think she had abated the tempest of his dreams. She fell asleep herself with the slow rise and fall of Shindo's measured breathing. And that's it.
Awesome. Do a little clap for you if it loads. It's not loading. All right, I'm going to edit it in. You do get a round of applause now. Cool. All right, so final question before I let you go.
Right.
As this is a story about the end of the world, are there any messages that you are trying to give to your readers, perhaps a forewarning about what's to come or anything like that?
It's really just a message of hope. It's a message of don't just throw up your hands and give up. Just try to understand the worlds of the problems of the world. It's really all I can ask is just we try to understand each other and really try to understand how, given where we are, and just doing enough research and enough knowledge, enough talking to the right people, how can we take where we are from here and go forward, especially in a better direction? So I would say it's a message of hope, but not just blind hope. Hope, but you really know your stuff. You really know what's possible. So pragmatic. That's the word I'm trying to say. Hope, but with a tinge of pragmatic, prag, with a tinge of pragmatism. I think so.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Nathan Peter Olgoff. And there's going to be more clapping right here.